Welcome to the Black on Black Education Podcast, where we interview the most brilliant minds
and connected hearts to discuss our shared passion for the transformation,
the revolution,
reimagining,
and recreation
of education in the Black community.
My name is Eva Loren Jean Charles, founder of Black on Black Education and New York City high school teacher.
And I'm Jamal Thomas, her partner and dad, education enthusiast.
And we're your hosts. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.
And most importantly, to enjoy the episode. All right. We are back for another episode of the Black on Black Education Podcast. This is a special one. This is the first time we are taping a podcast out of state. So we like to ask our guests who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
My name is Kanika Burks. I am a principal at a charter school here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I do what I do because I want to make sure that young people see what they can possibly be. And the power of education is everything and necessary for our young people.
Love it.
My name is Shenora Jordan. I am a principal in Milwaukee as well. I am a principal at a private school, which is Bessemer High School. This is my third year there, but this is my 17th year in education. I do what I do because I believe in students that look like me, and they need educators to believe in them. And most importantly, they need educators that believe in them that look like them.
Yes.
And so happy to do it. Happy to be here.
Yes. Well, we are happy that you are here. We got introduced to you through someone who introduced us to somebody. Like it was just such
I saw an article.
But somebody sent us the article after the podcast.
Okay.
Yes.
I wish that I remembered who that was. Maybe we'll put it in the show
Trap
notes.
Therapy.
It might be.
It was.
Okay.
It was. Yes. Stacia introduced us to Trap Therapy. In my head, not my heart. I just don't remember her name right now. And that's how we got the article about y'all.
Right.
Yeah, and the work that y'all were doing out here. So just like tell us about PrinciGALS. What is that? Why is it important? Why did you start it? Like where did this mission, this inspiration, this really, really dope project that y'all are doing, where did it come from?
Right. Kanika's always like, So Melanated PrinciGALS is a collection of Black and brown principals that primarily right now are serving Milwaukee. Hopefully we will expand it nationally.
Absolutely.
But during the time when this school year or last school year started, principals were forced to lead schools with teachers that did not look like them. We were continuously looking at significant academic gaps of students. Yeah. We were talking about COVID-19 and like how are we mitigating that to be safe?
Yeah.
And there was social unrest. And so being the leader of a school and the face of that school, and you're forced to lead people that don't look like you and serve students that do look like you, it can be a stressful and very challenging position. And so God really came to me with the idea to find other school leaders that look like me that are sharing those same struggles and provide an opportunity for us to collaborate and to build, if not anything, just be a sistership for each other.
I love it.
Which is, it's so incredibly important. And, it's so interesting that, it's the pandemic that has birthed so many different things. And I remember having conversations towards the beginning where we said, if we go back to school and things look exactly the same way as they did before we, entered this phase, shame on us. And I feel like in a lot of places that is exactly what's happening. So I'm curious about the landscape of, education in Milwaukee and how you guys are finding similarities, differences from, since when you guys started and during the pandemic.
Wow. You said this is your 17th year in education. This is my 22nd year, going into my 12th year as a principal. And when you ask the question of when we started, are you talking like when we were leading before the pandemic started, or just over our careers as leaders?
So actually, I was asking specific to right before the pandemic, but I definitely want to hear about the, now the overall journey.
All right. Well, I'll talk about the immediate. Prior to the pandemic, school was what I think everybody would normally think about. It was an environment that we created in our buildings, where love was shown to children, welcome them into the building, excited about learning, may start your day with an assembly, may go into your content area classes, also making sure that students were receiving their specials, so art and music, physical education, going on, foreign language in our high schools. So pretty traditional. Shenora's at a faith-based school. So you have the religious aspect in both of our schools, teaching students how to advocate for themselves and talk about their needs, focusing on that social emotional piece. And then the pandemic hit, right? I think it was like March. It was Friday the 13th, I feel like.
It was.
And I can remember hearing like, take everything home that you may need. And as a school leader, that's like my whole building, right? Take everything I need to be successful. And so it was just, okay, so what's going to happen next? And then that immediate training on, okay, now we're going to do this virtually. And we were familiar with Google Classroom and different platforms that we were using in our building, in tandem with traditional teaching. And now this was one of the key platforms that we were using. And then we were introduced to Zoom and Google Classroom were the biggest ones. And so you had leaders learning new technology at the same rate as the teachers were learning the technology. But you have young people that are not afraid of technology at all. So they're like, okay, what are we doing? You know, and they're learning things, introducing new things, some that were beneficial to the educational experience, some that were not at that time. So everyone is learning the technological side of education while being at home. So that piece that was missing was the community. So now we had to learn how to create community virtually. We had to learn how to be in tune with a child through a computer. And if that screen was off, you know, you had to figure out other methods of communicating. So now you're using multiple modes of technology. You're using your laptop. You may be texting. You may have multiple laptops, but figuring out every way to be able to communicate with, as a leader, with all your stakeholders. So is the teacher struggling with technology? Is the child struggling with technology? Do households have enough bandwidth to deal with what we're asking them to do? Trying to find hotspots for families.
Trying to find Chromebooks for families. So at one point in time, there were no Chromebooks.
And so once you found the Chromebook, then having that Chromebook drive to get, you know, we everything was a drive-by. Drive-by had a new connotation, right?
Sure
You're
did.
driving up to get your curriculum. You're driving up to get a hotspot. You're driving up to get a Chromebook. And what about those families that couldn't just drive up, right? So now we're also delivering things to families. And there were some amazing things that were birthed from that. Having to do graduation virtually. That first year was like, no, we're going to everybody's house, right? Do you know how powerful that was to go to? Everybody got their own individual graduation, right?
They did.
And you got to see their families and how creative the families were. So, okay, we can't all go to the school, but you all can come here. And so we're rolling up, beeping and celebrating our scholars at MCP. It was amazing. But can we do that every single year? Right? So that next year being fully, you know, doing something fully virtual, and this past year was our first in-person graduation. And it was special, but you're still in some environments limiting the number of people who can come in and things like that. So there were definitely some shifts. you will not hear either one of us say, oh, we want to go back to normal,
Right.
or we want to go back to pre-pandemic.
No.
Because through everything, we're educators, right? So we've
Yeah.
learned new things. We've learned the power of technology. Did you have parent-teacher conferences
We
via
had
Zoom?
Yep, we had all of our conferences via Zoom, and parents appreciated it.
Yes.
Our teachers appreciated it.
Mhm.
We learned so many of our students relied heavily, which we knew it, but we really learned that they relied heavily on the school for food, for
Mhm.
shelter.
Did it increase attendance, like the in terms
Parent
of how many
attendance?
parents actually engage with back to school?
for
the-
for conferences.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Mesmer is different because I required
Mhm.
conferences, and historically that hasn't been the case.
Mhm.
So we were averaging 86%. 86% of our families attended conferences, where in previous years it was probably the complete opposite. So I don't know if it increased, but since I got there, it increased.
Right.
But we created learning spaces for our students in our gym. They came in, they still were attending classes virtually, but because some of our students needed the shelter, needed meals, or just needed an adult to be with them to say, you need to go log into this Zoom. So we set up a gym, maybe we had 50 kids in there, and they were all kind of like boxed in, just to be safe, but to still provide the service that we would normally do. We just figured out a way to serve despite everything that was going on.
That term, no excuses, right? We had to figure out how this was going to work. And now, we transitioned back. We kind of had a hybrid model. When we first transitioned, there were still scholars at home. There were some in the building. And then we came back fully in person. And guess what? The positivity rate increased. So we had to switch back to virtual. So a lot of people think that first year when we, the pandemic hit and we had to switch, was the toughest year. I would definitely push back and say this last school year was the toughest year. However, the things that we learned when we talk about differentiation, it took on a whole new, not a whole new meaning. It made people think differently about what it means to differentiate, what it means to meet the needs of the child.
Right.
The fact that as a educator, I have to change. We have young geniuses in front of us. So I have to change to teach the young mind in front of me, and also how to connect with parents. Being able to have a conference via Zoom allowed more parents to get to all of their children's conferences. So they may have physically been in the building, because similar to Mesmer, at MCP, our parent-teacher conferences are required as well. Those first 2 quarters, and they got to go to all of them. So if you have 4 or 5 students, or even 2 or 3, and you want to make sure you hit every teacher, you can do that via Zoom much easier than you can in person. So some relationships were built in a way that were stronger than in person, just because we could meet the needs of their schedule where they were, whether they were at home, whether they were at work. And so those are some things. Within our network, we have 4 campuses. So being able to bring the entire network together via Zoom versus all of us going into one campus and kind of being tight. But that's something that we can still leverage. Or trying to drive to one campus. Like, let's eliminate that travel time. And, log on to Zoom. You can still break out. And again, we absolutely want to be face-to-face, but what's making things more efficient so that we can be more effective for children.
As an educator, so much of what you're saying is so important. And to hear the way that y'all lead is so beautiful. Because I know that there are a lot of educators listening to this podcast right now that are like, my principals did not show up for me that way. My school leaders did not show up for me that way. And that they didn't recognize that they had to hold me accountable to what you said about like, I need to change, right? It's not about, oh, I'm not teaching online because of X, Y, and Z. Like, the kids know how to meet us where we need them to meet us in terms of technology because of their technological understanding. And I'm sure there were tons of kids who didn't have to use computers or laptops as often until the pandemic, but they already have such an understanding of how to navigate this space in a way that adults did not. And I think that recognizing that in this conversation, we have to hold the adults accountable. And the no excuses oftentimes is something that is said toward children. There's no excuse for that behavior. There's no excuse for the way that you showed up. There's no excuse for, and I love like flipping that on its head and making educators and school leaders recognize that there was no excuse for us to not make the shifts that need to be made and not learn from those shifts. It was not just something that we were supposed to do because of the pandemic. It was like, wow, we learned that we can do this, this, and this. Right. Let's not run from the changes that we had to make to navigate this. Let's actually figure out how we use it to our benefit later. So my school conferences were required. It still was a struggle to get parents and to come. And so me coming into the classroom and doing conferences, like when we had a conversation, I mean, parents, like, it was an incredible jump in terms of like, the parent is in the car and they're like, yeah, but I'm here because I can log in. I'm like, I'm on my way to my second job, but I can come. Right. Whereas I couldn't stop by the school for 5 minutes on my way to work. Like that wasn't gonna work. So it was incredible to see that. And I think that sometimes, again, leadership has to recognize that just because you want something a particular way does not mean that that is what works best for families. And so the idea that like, okay, now everything needs to be in person again, that might not work for everybody. And let's learn from what we had to learn from and make it better as we move forward.
And I mean, it makes me think about, why do we always have to learn from a thing? Why can't we be more proactive about some of these things? Because it's clear that, you know, there was reasons why somebody who has 4 or 5 children cannot make it to all of them. Why do we have to have a pandemic to recognize, hey, what do we want to do to make things easier? And there's so many different areas in the education space that we can ask questions now about, what does this need to look like to be better for students? What does this need to look like to be better for parents? What does this need to look like to be better for teachers? What does this need to look like to be better for administration? And
that's never how the question is asked. Like on the national scale, on a like more often than not, that's never how the question is asked. This is wrong. This is the problem. Why is it happening this way? Instead of, what does it need to look like to exist in this way?
Right. I appreciate the fact that you mentioned all stakeholders in education.
Yep.
Oftentimes, and I will say our teachers, superstars, rock stars during this, in educating overall, educating during this pandemic, and now we're still in the pandemic. So continuing to educate through all of the challenges. But there is this notion that we have the resources to do the things that we need to do. And something on social media where it talked about getting what you need for your classroom should not require you to have a second job.
Right. Yep. Or a GoFundMe.
Or something. And I don't always feel that people who are not in education understand all that teachers do.
Absolutely.
Or understand the emotional side of being an educator at any level. Being an administrator and knowing that you don't know the answer and saying like, I don't know. And knowing that when I say I don't know, I know I've just increased your anxiety, but I'm going to be very genuine to you and tell you, I don't know the answer. We're going to figure it out together.
Yep.
But that heightens your anxiety. There are things that we are responsible for that the teachers will never know, the students will never know, and the parents will never know. But this made me really say, like, hey, we're all human beings and we're all going through something. How do we go through this something together and not stop, but create something amazing as we continue to move forward? Because we're not going backward.
No.
that just makes me bring up a question, right? How do we begin to facilitate those conversations where folks who are not in this space recognize and understand and want to be a part of the conversation, that to gain an understanding, but also to figure out how we collaborate and communicate around what the solutions are? Because I think that if people didn't understood, they would show up very, very differently. Like if somebody shadowed what I do in a day or what you do in a day, like the amount of empathy that I would need that person to have would be incredible. And I can't imagine most people having had that experience and not being able to show that empathy. So just talk about like ideas that come kind of off the head of ways that we can cultivate building that relationship to help people better understand what it is to be an educator and the help that we need. Like that's just we need support from all the stakeholders.
A lot of things are flooding my mind.
It's a big question.
It is.
Seeking to understand, right? Oftentimes there's this us against them. And whoever's sitting on the us side, whoever's sitting on the them side, it's combative versus collaborative, versus what am I willing to let go of? What am I not willing to let go of to try to reach consensus? You talked about collaboration, communication, also knowing that we all have a past educational experience. So if you did not have a positive educational experience, you may show up in a way that you're like, yeah, I don't care because of what I experienced. Each one of us show up in our spaces because of what we experienced. I didn't have a Black leader as a child. That was one of the reasons why I'm like, oh, I want to go into education. I loved learning, right? I want to show everybody that they can love learning too. But it is all of those experiences coming into a space, all of these different emotions coming into a space. So if we can get through the emotion and say, okay, we're here about our children. And there I go tapping the table. We're here about our children. And going into conversations with, this is a solutions-oriented conversation. It's not a conversation to point fingers at anyone, because there's greatness in all of us, and every one of us has made a mistake. Right? And so
or maybe three. Maybe three. Maximum.
Or 10. Right?
What I was thinking about when you asked your question and how you're responding is the value that the communities place on our children. And so when you think about how everyone showed up for the nurses and the doctors at the height of the pandemic, because we're still in it, right? It's because they place value on the people that they were serving, right? Those people could be, or probably are, my relatives, my parents. And so we show great empathy towards those people that are serving them because we value the people that they are serving. And I feel like that's how we can build their empathy or their empathetic muscle, is just to help them see the value of the students that we serve.
Love that.
And I mean, this is broader, and it takes us slightly outside of just education, because what ultimately becomes the question when we're talking about having that empathy, it's kind of like, who's your neighbor? And so, you know, it's for my neighborhood kids over here, I have that empathy, but for the little, you know, whatever they call us, you know, over there, they don't have the very same empathy, because they don't look at, you know, them as their neighbors. So I don't know how we change that.
But it's unfortunately more insidious than that. it's the TV shows, it's the stories that are on the news, the very particularly curated image of a particular child, right? And so we can't pretend like that the super predator isn't still a archetype in people in our country's mindsets. And so it's more than just like, I don't feel like you're my neighbor, I feel like you're my enemy. I feel like you are doing something bad and wrong, and you should be punished for it. And so it's a deeper, we have to, these are deep issues that we have to address in order for you to, you go and you, almost every time I tell somebody that I teach in the South Bronx, oh, that must be hard. Every time, almost every, that must be tough.
And we're like, that's dope.
And I'm like, what you
right? When she said that, I was like,
okay. Like, listen, my kids is lit. I don't know about yours. Like, I have a great time on a day-to-day basis. I tell people 10 times out of 10, it is not the reason. The reason that I would leave the classroom has nothing to do with the kids. Absolutely nothing.
It's never the kids.
I'll complain about them.
Yeah.
Every now and again, because they be getting on your nerves, you know. But it's the adults every time. It is the policy every time. It is the lack of resources every time. It is the inability to connect with folks who don't understand our kids every time. It's not them. So I definitely hear you on the neighbor, but we have a lot more to dig into that piece for sure.
So I want to still stay in this area, but change a little bit and specify the feelings that we're talking about back to education, because you work at a charter, you work at a private school. We have obviously public schools. Sometimes right within that education conversation, there's just lack of understanding. So when I heard about you guys and that you guys are all working together and you're all, working together in a united way without saying, oh, the charters are taking away the money and the private ones doing this.
It's all Milwaukee.
So if you could give us an understanding of kind of how it works here in Milwaukee, because it's different from
big question.
I mean, just to,
a little synopsis.
A little synopsis of how it works, and are the different parts of the education, like, are we finding them everybody's fighting or is
what's going on? Let us know. What's going on?
What's the tea?
Right? Let's sip it. What's up?
From our perspective.
Yes.
So
opinions on
the educational landscape in Milwaukee, every type of education is here. If you want virtual education, public education, charter schools are public schools.
Yes.
So you have non-instrumentality charters, you have instrumentality charters.
Instrumentality?
Yeah.
I knew you were going to ask me that question. A non-instrumentality charter, I almost want to pull out my notes.
Sometimes these things that we hear all the time, we got to break it down.
And at one point in my life, I could say, off the top of my head, around, we are a non-instrumentality charter connected to Milwaukee Public Schools. The employees in our network are not Milwaukee Public School employees. Our curriculum is different. The autonomy, higher accountability. So it is around who you're attached to, some of the funding sources. And I promise you, I will send you the information, because I feel like I'm not accurately articulating that. But there are two types of.
You're good. I'm like, you're doing great.
Okay, I operate independently within Milwaukee Public Schools, but there are different chartering agencies in the city of Milwaukee. The city of Milwaukee is one. UWM is one. Milwaukee Public Schools is one. I know that at one time, I think the Institute for the Transformation of Learning may have been one. Don't quote me on that. I have to check that for accuracy.
It's okay. Shout out to Tommy in the back for the help.
And so there are different chartering agencies. Then you have traditional district schools. So you have Milwaukee Public Schools, you have Wauwatosa Public Schools, Brookfield, Shorewood, Brown Deer. did I say Waukesha? But those are all around Milwaukee.
Instrumentalities would have a specialty school inside of their district that follows their curriculum and their guidance. So they can have a school of science inside of MPS's instrumentality because they are controlled by MPS.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Did you say that into the microphone?
Yeah.
No, I'm giving you.
You're giving it. I was like, turn your mic up. So the instrumentality charter school is within a district, but has a unique curriculum, a unique, maybe science is the focus, maybe art is the focus. And then you have parochial schools, faith-based schools in the city of Milwaukee that are tuition based. Then you have private schools in the city of Milwaukee that may not be faith-based, but are a private entity where families are paying a tuition.
Or they can apply for school choice.
Can apply. That was the next piece. They can apply for school choice to receive a voucher to go to that school. And many of the private and parochial schools have a certain number of seats that they have
available for the vouchers. Okay.
Yes. I think I hit
all
the types of schools.
But I mean,
I'm just going to say shout out to HF because he was the one that made sure that I learned all of that. So, I mean, we have the educational landscape, though we have one of the widest achievement gaps, if not the widest in the country, in the state of Wisconsin. I believe that everything that we need to be successful is in this city, is in this state. But there's a lot of adulting. There's a lot of egoing. There are a lot of politicking happening to prevent things from coming together. PrinciGALS is a platform. And at this point, I would say informally, we're not attached to any one of those types of schools. We have women who represent all of those types of schools. City Forward Collective in the city of Milwaukee brings all of these different types of educational entities together. So there are different organizations that will bring us together around professional development and building capacity, networking. However, is that the norm? It's not. And it is unfortunate because we call each other and realize we're experiencing the same
things.
thing. We're educating children in the city of Milwaukee. We're experiencing the highs and the lows. And you learn from different experiences. I love my alma mater, but they did not teach me how to be a principal in the midst of a pandemic or in the midst of fill in the blank, right?
Well, they don't know how, and something we talk about very regularly now, and all of the teacher training programs, whether it's at a traditional college or something like, the other ones that will go unnamed.
Teach for America. It's okay. You can say the name.
I know.
And it's not you're terrible and that's it and we throw you out. Like, no, it's just we have to have the conversations about how educators are being trained to go in the classroom and how and in what ways those are beneficial to the changes that we want to see in education. TFA. Like, the vibes.
But again, it's not just them. That's the reality. You know what I mean? There's people who are teaching how to be a teacher who haven't been a teacher for 20, 30 years.
How to be a teacher when they didn't like being a teacher.
Right. Or they weren't a
good teacher.
And they're reading books and operating from a curriculum that has shifted this much from so long ago that it's just not ready for 2022. And if it's not ready for 2022, it's damn sure not going to be ready for like 2030 or 2035, which is where we need to be preparing students for. There's really a complete reimagining. That kind of
what is school for? We're still operating with Horace Mann's idea in mind.
it just Tyek's book of one best system, right? It's schools the way they are right now were not created for people that look like us.
No.
However, we're still operating
Within
under
them.
those same structures, the same school schedule, the time that kids go to school, for how long, when we have breaks, all of those things. And it is 2022. Like, how can we do things differently?
So, I mean, what we're gonna do is, I don't have the magic wand here.
You gonna switch the mic?
I'm gonna
Going to the
out.
one question already.
We got. I mean, it's just the time. Like, we talk about all of the you know, the
True.
stuff, but you know, you got the magic wand. You know what I mean? Here it is. We'll paint a picture of how you transform Milwaukee schools.
Okay, I was like, wait, don't
Don't exclude me.
That's right. Well, you know, at Mesmer, I created 10 pathways because, the CEO at Milwaukee College Prep was my principal when I was growing up. And he was a great principal. He was the best principal ever. But he pushed college prep, right? Like, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college. Everybody's going to college. And we know that our students may not want to go to college. And if they do go to college, they walk away with a degree that they can't do anything with. And a whole lot of debt. And they may not have the skills that they need to be able to really provide for themselves. And so at Mesmer, I created 10 pathways that were like, hey, you are called to do something. Let's help you discover what it is that you're called to do, and let's push you to do that. So if you feel like you want to go into healthcare, by the time you're 16, let's help you get your CNA certification, or let's look at phlebotomy. Or if you think you want to go into a trade, let's hook you up into some intro to welding courses. You want to go in education, I want you to go in education because I need you to go in education. Let's send you to Seafoot for the summer and be a student teacher, and I'll pay you with these other funds so that, you know, you have that summer experience, and then you come back in the fall and you'll get some classes that you'll get college credit for your junior year. I want you to be able to know on your graduation day what you are called to do, what you like to do, and how you're going to pay for it. I love that. So, like, you're required to apply for all these schools. You're required to apply for scholarships and FAFSA. And I need you to be able to tell me what it is that you want to do. Not that you want to be a doctor because it sounds great because you don't even like biology. Like, really and truly, what are you called to do?
Yeah.
And I think our students in the last 10 years haven't been able to answer that question. They go to college that we were told. I remember when I was in college, we were told it was okay to be undecided. Like, oh, you'll figure it out. Our Black and brown kids cannot afford to figure it out. It is our responsibility by the time they leave me that you know what it is that you want to do, or you have a really good idea. You have like two choices. Like, I either want to go into this field or that field, and this is how I'm going to do it.
I mean, and I guess the only thing I would say related to that is that I think it's important to get them kicked off and started. But, you know, I hear statistics that people are going to have like 7 different careers, not 7 different jobs, 7 different careers in their lifetime now. So, you know, getting them to a place where they're prepared to go out and do something where they can, you know, sustain and maintain, but that they have the mentality of a continuous type of learning that is going to allow them to be open to, oh, I can make this complete pivot.
But I think that that's also what happens when you know what you're called to do.
Yes.
If you're called, I'm an educator. That is what I was meant to do. That's why I lined my teddy bears up and told them to shut up and listen to me. Now, that was reflective of the teachers that I had at the time. But that is why I knew. So, but I know that I don't want to be an educator in a classroom the rest of my life. So I know how to use what I'm called to do to pivot to do all those other things. But if you don't have the base point, moving all over the place is just going to be based off of money. And then how do you sustain yourself?
Right.
You raised 3 questions on the high school level, and you're talking about a calling, like what's going to be possibly your vocation in life. When you talked about those 3 questions, it made me think about Milwaukee College Prep's Declaration of Excellence, and the children from K4 reciting that they are going to use each day to really think about who they are, what they want,
Mhm.
and where they're going. So when you talk about working together to say in a K4, well now K3 to 8 environment, that you're thinking about these 3 questions. But I know that I'm now going to send you to a high school that's going to build on that.
Right.
And then you're going to go into this next environment knowing that who I am is going to change from the time that I am 3 to the time that I am in 8th grade to the time that I am in high school. But I had all this time and space to think about it.
Yeah.
And that again is the human side of education.
Yeah.
That they're children who are growing, and we're like, what do you want to be? I want to be a superhero. Like that's cute when they're little, right? But when you get into 7th and 8th grade and they're saying the same thing, then I start to ask, like, so what's your definition of a superhero? And they may say being a doctor. So they may say becoming an architect. And then you ask the question, like, what are you going to do with that? Oh, I want to build houses for the homeless people that I see when I come to school every day so that they have a place to go. And so it is asking that question. If you say I want to be an architect, talk to me more about that.
Yes.
So then you can understand. Or I want to be a doctor. Really? Why? And then you can help children, because I said as a child that I wanted to be a doctor when I was a little girl. All I knew were medical doctors. Then I got to high school and took an anatomy, something where we were cutting things. And I was like, okay, I know I would never be able to make it through a gross anatomy class in college. So in that moment, I was like, I can't be a doctor. And there was a teacher to say, well, you know that you can get your doctorate degree. I was like, what is that? And this, and this. And I was like, for real? And now that dream that I had as a little girl is manifesting itself now because I'm in a doctoral program and, you know, that doctor of education, right? And so it's like, so the dream that I thought I couldn't have, it took a teacher to tell me, like, there are other things, to say that you may want to go into this career, you may want to go into the NBA. What are all of the things that you can do in the NBA besides playing on the court? And you might play on the court. Listen, like, I don't want to tell you that you can't. These are all the things that you can do.
And it's not even just to say that you can't. It's also to say, like, okay, but what's the shelf life? And so then now, like, I have a student right now who that is what I'm going to do. Dope. When you're 28, what are you going to do?
Right.
And then he's like, well, I don't know. I'm going to play basketball. And I'm like, maybe.
Right.
Or maybe you'll do this, or maybe you'll coach, or maybe you'll create this nonprofit, or like maybe you'll do like and so it's exposure. It's giving.
You're molding the dream a little bit for them. You're making it a little bit more real, a little bit more possible, as well as inspiring something inside them to say, oh wow, this is way more than I thought of. You're adding distinctions and things to that effect, and as that happens for the rest of their life, they're going to then say, when they start to think about a thing, what are all of the things that connect to that thing? That's what education, in my opinion, should be more about.
Well, because we want them to start asking the questions that we're asking them themselves eventually. Like, I mean, my cousin, his niece, right? She wants to be a doctor, right? That is 6 years, it's almost 6 years old. I'm going to be a doctor. So like, she's playing the piano, and like, she doesn't want to stop playing the piano, even though I don't think she likes playing the piano, but she doesn't want to stop playing the piano because she wants to get her fingers strong, because she wants to be a doctor. And like, and in 5 years, she might not want to be a doctor anymore, but she also recognizes that like, she was willing to do these different things in order to get that goal, which means that she'll be willing to do different things in order to get whatever her different goal is. And so it's, how do you explain? It's not do this because I told you to. And that's how much education is. I told you algebra was important. I haven't shown you that. Teachers in the classroom can't I wouldn't know how to show a child why algebra is important. I'm sure there are ways. I just don't know what they are.
Especially when that teacher doesn't look like them or anything, and they don't look like their mama, so they don't trust them. They don't believe in them. They, and
then you don't even make an effort to like know them. Like there are teachers in my school who the kids will walk into the classroom. They don't even say hello. It's like, sit down, open your note. And you're like, huh?
Going back to the value, right?
part.
If you value who you serve,
Yes.
you're going to go above and beyond to care and educate them, to care for and educate them.
Yeah.
Oh, your magic wand. You did your magic wand.
She kind of gave the magic wand.
Yes.
You want to jump in on with your magic wand and build off of Shenora's points?
Like Shenora, I'm literally after this, like, okay, we're gonna get together because those 10 pathways, because it's like backwards design almost of and I think about our network, and I did have a scholar come back and say, like, when I realized that I did not want to go to a traditional college, I thought that I failed. And I was like, oh, right. And so we are saying, like, we want you to have everything you need to go to college if that's your choice. Right. But then thinking about our mission of knowledge plus character paves the way to college and beyond.
It starts with college,
but that college is still there. So really thinking about what messages are we giving to children, and so not a magic wand, right, but a aha moment around. There are times when adults think, you know what, this is what's best for children, and don't realize that I gave you this message, because when that scholar came back and said that to me, I was like, you are not a failure. Like, you have how many businesses? Like, you're an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And so that is something that didn't necessarily require you to go to a 2-year or 4-year college, and you may be making more money than somebody that went to
talk about it.
a place that has a degree or a certification. So, what is that genius? How are we highlighting that learning ability? So I guess my magic wand is to listen to the children. If they're not okay, no one is okay. And listen to them, and know that even though we're the educators, they're educating us.
Absolutely.
And if we're not being educated by the young people in front of us, that's when we start getting into all these politics and thinking that we know what's best for our young people, when they're teaching us a whole lot
all the time.
Yes.
I mean, it comes down to the need for us to start to tell a new, better, different story about education. The idea that, go to school, get good grades, go to college, and you'll live happily ever after. It's just not. It's completely incomplete. There are lots of people who are obviously not going to do that. There are lots of people who are going to do terrible in school and then go on to do well. I was a horrible student. I'm doing okay now. Getting better.
There.
But I've had like a tremendous career, outside without, almost anything that I learned from school. I followed my own personal curiosity, and I think that is a value that we need to most certainly adjust. So we are coming up towards the tail end of our convo, and our last question, we always turn the tables and let you guys ask us a question. But before that, we want you to please let people know how they can get in touch with you. Let people know how they can support your work. Please.
So how you can get in touch with us around PrinciGALS.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We are both on social media. On Facebook, I am Kanika Burks on Facebook, on LinkedIn.
You're on Instagram too, right?
Listen,
is that a work in progress?
Somebody tried to get me, y'all. So that's put a middle initial in and all of that stuff. So we're working on that. A young person was helping me trying to figure that out before I stepped in here. But also at our respective schools, I am Kanika.Burks at mkeprep.com. Love MCP. And I am open to talking to you about being a leader in education, about PrinciGALS, about being a Black woman and being your authentic self as a leader, about just how you doing, right? So open.
Yeah. Same. I'm Shenora Jae on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but I'm not as active, but it's there. You can definitely find me at sjordan at mesmerschools.org. Always open to have conversation with female leaders. A lot of times when I'm connecting with them, it's not even on an educational level.
Absolutely.
It is merely like, how do I show up and be me and make a difference? We're pushing back and forth about salaries and decisions, because who did we learn that from, right? And so, yeah, willing to support, lean in, collaborate, whatever we need to do for all leaders, but especially for our Black and brown female leaders.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. And so now, I mean, we've made it to the final part of our episode. We are no longer the interviewer. That is your job. And you get to ask us a question about anything we talked about today.
Or didn't talk about.
That you just want to bring up. Yeah.
As a classroom teacher.
Yeah. I know where this is going.
What advice would you give to school leaders to better support you?
You hired me for a reason. I think too often leadership becomes, for some people, not making people better. And that is how I try to define it for myself when I'm leading Black and Black education, when I'm leading in the classroom. How do I make the people I'm serving better? In some spaces, leadership becomes, I have an idea of how everything should work and the way that everything should work. And so I want to support you in making it work the way I need it to work, instead of figuring out what the solution is. And so if you hired me, there's something in what I was doing, something in the way that I showed up to that interview that made you say yes to me. So whatever those assets were, let me bring them into the space to make everybody better. And that might sometimes go in conflict with your vision, but as a leader, sometimes you have to recognize that the conflict with your vision either means that we need to part ways because our visions don't match, and that's okay, or that I see the value in your vision and recognize that maybe the vision that you have works better for the people that we serve. And I'm saying that very particularly to folks who serve in communities that they don't look like, with staff that they don't look like, and with experiences that they've never had. And so it's very hard for you to lead people without understanding who they are, why they do this work, and what they have to offer to the work.
And that connects to Kanika's point about teachers who have an unwillingness to listen to students. It's, the administration having an unwillingness to teachers. They don't model the behavior of listening. And so the teachers don't pick up that modeling to say, okay, the same thing that's going on with my leadership, I'm going to do that with students. And sometimes I feel like things, it's there's a spirit to it, as much as it's strategies. So any questions?
Well, mine is similar to Kanika's question, but like, we are coming up on a school year where we're seeing teachers leave the classroom, and I never would have thought that numbers of teachers just saying, yeah, I'm going to just go and get another job completely out of education. Why are you staying? And what can leaders and community members do to retain educators like you long term?
We need to make a shift. Like, there needs to be a serious shift. And I think that as much time as school leader, and that it's hard to say it directly to the leader, because it feels like a lot of what's coming up has to be said to the system. But for individual leaders, like, in whatever capacity you have, how do you show up in that you are supporting what teachers need from a systemic standpoint.
Mm.
So like, what are the what is leadership in my space doing to show me that they're advocating with the state for more funding to pay their teachers more? What are you like? And I know, again, with the time crunch and how much leaders have to do and how little resources they have, that becomes difficult. But that's where, again, how do we do this stuff as a community? How do you join some sort of coalition as a leader? How do you better yourself in terms of mentorship as a leader in a school? How do you go and get that leadership coach to support you in what you have going on? Because I recognize for myself, honestly, the biggest reason why I felt stressed out or feel stressed out all the time is because I be doing too much. And our leaders do the same thing. And our people do the same thing. We go burn ourselves out and now we're nothing for nobody.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, how do you show up in the way that you want me to?
Right.
That's good.
I'm going to knock on wood because I kind of hope that I'm wrong here. And I'm on my local school board. So I'm paying attention to some of the stuff from the policy perspective. But unfortunately, what might have to happen is that those teachers might have to leave, and they might break the system. Like the system may break and crack and fracture in a way that it's so obvious and self like that we need to, the way when the airlines were going under, somebody just threw billions and billions and billions of dollars at them. Maybe the schools are going to need some type of bailout. You know what I mean? That includes us saying, okay, we are finally going to bring the resources to bear that are going to allow us to have a 21st century learning environments. We're truly going to be innovative here, because we can't have the system
Absolutely.
where it's now kids are all over the place and everybody's wilding out and there's no place for them to go because there's not enough people there. And then each piece makes it worse. Like the worse it gets, the more teachers are going to want to leave. And
right, exactly. And it's so hard to avoid feeling like that is the only answer when we're in a space where it feels like you're being like, it's either I tell somebody I'm a teacher and they're like, oh my God.
God bless you.
Oh my
Right?
God.
That's
Keep
right.
in the airport.
3 times in the last 24 hours.
Keep doing what you're doing, please. And then you have the people who are like, you don't want to be here. Sit down and shut up and don't teach these kids what I don't want you to teach them. And you're like, well, then you come do it then. Oh, okay then. So it's just we're just in a space where like something's gonna have to happen, and that something's gonna need to happen sooner rather than later. We're gonna have kids. New York City, we have lost children. We do not know where they are. It's true. It's true. Thousands of kids that before COVID we knew where they were, and now we do not. That is scary. Yeah. And we don't have the systems in place in order to find those children or figure out what is going on with these families. It is baffling. And these are the things that we want educators, particularly the good ones who want the system to change. I have to go to school, I have to teach my kids, I have to be their mentor, I have to be their guidance counselor, I have to be their support system, and I have to go fight the system that is making all of these things, these experiences they're having, confounding them. I have to do all of those things at the same time. And it leads to a no, I don't have an option but to leave this place or I am going to die.
Right. Do either one of you guys want to add anything before we get out of here? We really do appreciate your time.
No.
Mic drop.
Appreciate you. We appreciate this space. So,
well, thank you both for joining us. We truly appreciate it. We look forward to doing this again next time we are in Milwaukee.
Absolutely.
And on that note, that is another episode of the Black on Black Education Podcast. I got the podcast name wrong, y'all.
That's another episode of the Black on Black Education Podcast. Y'all know how many times I got to bail this man out. Thank you for listening, and we will see y'all next week.